On the morning of December 23, 2015, 2 days before Christmas, first responders arrived at a home in Connecticut. What they found inside would set in motion one of the most closely examined criminal investigations in the state's recent history. At the center of that investigation would be something most people had clipped to their waistband without a second thought: a small, lightweight fitness tracker, the kind of device that counts your steps, records your movement, logs your activity minute by minute, hour by hour, without ever being asked. It's a device designed to help people live healthier lives. But in the case of Connie Dabate, a wife, a mother, a pharmaceutical sales representative from Connecticut, that small device would ultimately speak for her when she no longer could. Before we examine what investigators found inside that Connecticut home on December 23, 2015, we need to understand who Connie Dabate was. And we need to understand the life she and her husband Richard had built together. And, according to what investigators would later uncover, the life that was quietly unraveling beneath the surface. Connie Dabate was born Connie Margata in 1976. She was, by the time of her death in December 2015, 39 years old. Court records and public reporting indicate that Connie worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative for Reckitt Benckiser, a multinational consumer goods and pharmaceutical company. By all public accounts, she was a working professional, a woman with a career, a schedule, responsibilities, and a life that extended well beyond the walls of her home. Connie and Richard Dabate were married on July 4, 2003. At the time of the murder, the couple had 2 young sons together. Richard Dabate worked as a computer network administrator. The couple's life, on the surface, resembled what many would describe as an ordinary suburban existence: a home in Connecticut, 2 children, 2 careers. But investigators, in the course of examining what happened on December 23, 2015, would uncover a portrait of a marriage that was, according to the evidence they gathered, considerably more complicated than it may have appeared from the outside. The details of what was happening inside the Dabate marriage, the tensions, the disagreements, the secrets, would become central to understanding everything that followed. We'll examine that evidence in detail as we move through this story. But first, the morning of December 23, 2015. What happened, according to investigators and prosecutors, and what Richard Dabate told police happened. At approximately 10 o'clock in the morning on December 23, 2015, first responders were dispatched to the Dabate household in Connecticut. The call had been triggered by a panic alarm from the household security system. When Connecticut State Police officers arrived at the scene, what they found was a house that told an immediate story. Though, as investigators would come to understand, it was not necessarily the story they were initially presented with. According to court records and investigative reports, responding officers found Richard Dabate on the kitchen floor. His right wrist, according to those records, was tied to a folding chair. Zip ties were also attaching his ankles to the same chair. Elsewhere in the home, officers found Connie Dabate. She was found deceased. Emergency medical technicians arrived and treated Richard for injuries he had sustained. While Richard was being treated in an ambulance on the property, according to investigative records, police used dogs to attempt to find the scent trail of the supposed intruder Richard would describe to them. According to investigative records, those police dogs found only Richard's scent, leading police officers back to Richard in the ambulance several times over. Once investigators were able to speak with Richard Dabate, he provided them with a detailed account of what he said had occurred that morning. That account would form the foundation, and eventually, the undoing, of the early stages of this case. Richard Dabate told police that on the morning of December 23, 2015, he had left the family home on his way to work. According to his account, while he was already on the road, he realized he had forgotten something at home. Accounts from the investigation vary as to whether the item in question was his laptop or a work shirt. Sources disagree on this specific detail, but the central element of his account was consistent. He had turned around and driven back to the house. Richard told police that before turning around, he had pulled over to the side of the road and emailed his boss to explain presumably why he might be delayed. Upon returning home, Richard told police that he heard noises coming from the second floor of the house. According to his account, he went upstairs to investigate. What he told police he found there, according to investigators, was the beginning of an elaborate and detailed story. Richard told police that he discovered a man in the bedroom, rifling through a closet. According to Richard's account, this man was large in stature, wearing a camouflage suit and a mask. Richard told investigators that the man's voice resembled that of the actor Vin Diesel. Richard told police that this purported intruder overpowered him and took his wallet. According to Richard's account, Connie arrived home moments later. Richard told police that he yelled for her to flee. According to his account, the intruder allegedly used pressure points on Richard's wrist to restrain him while Connie attempted to escape. Richard told police that Connie fled to the basement. According to his account, the intruder followed her, and it was there, in the basement, that Connie was shot. Richard then told police that after shooting Connie, the intruder returned, zip-tied Richard to a chair, stabbed him, and used a blowtorch on him. Though Richard alleged that he struggled with the intruder and ultimately burned the intruder's face with the blowtorch, causing the man to flee the property. That was the account Richard Dabate gave to Connecticut State Police. It was detailed. It was specific. And according to the investigation that followed, it contained a number of significant problems. Connecticut State Police secured the scene and began what would become an extensive, multi-layered investigation. As is standard in cases of this nature, investigators collected physical evidence, interviewed witnesses, and began the painstaking process of attempting to verify or challenge the account they had been given. Among the first significant findings to emerge from the physical investigation was the result of the canine search conducted while Richard was being treated in the ambulance on the property. According to investigative records, the police dogs dispatched to find the scent trail of the supposed intruder found only Richard's scent, and that scent trail led back to the ambulance where Richard was being treated multiple times. The absence of any traceable scent trail leading away from the property in the direction any escaping intruder would have had to travel was, according to the investigation, one of the earliest physical inconsistencies to surface at the scene. But the physical evidence gathered at the scene was only one component of what Connecticut State Police would ultimately compile. As the investigation progressed and expanded, it was the digital evidence drawn from multiple sources that would prove to be most consequential. To understand how that digital evidence came to shape the investigation, we need to examine two things in parallel: the timeline that Richard Dabate gave police and the timeline that investigators were able to reconstruct independently. Richard Dabate told police that his encounter with the supposed intruder and Connie's subsequent death took place just after 9 o'clock in the morning on December 23, 2015. That was the timeline he provided, and it was a timeline that, according to investigators, the evidence did not support. Connecticut State Police investigators, working through what they described as a series of interrogations and interviews, began to identify specific holes in the account Richard had given them. As those holes expanded, investigators turned increasingly to the digital record, the kind of data that computers, networks, and wearable devices generate continuously and passively without anyone having to press a button or make a choice. The investigation found that Richard had used his computer during the window of time he claimed he was already on the road, driving to work. According to investigative findings, at 8:41 in the morning, Richard logged into his Outlook email account. The login was recorded as originating from the IP address of the Dabate family home. But this was significant because Richard had told police that he emailed his boss from the side of the road, implying he was already in his vehicle away from the property when that communication was sent. The IP address data indicated he was, in fact, still at home. The digital record continued. At 9:18 in the morning, according to the investigation, Richard accessed a web page showing the group exercise schedule for the Indian Valley YMCA. Shortly after that, he visited the ESPN website, specifically searching for the Mike and Mike show. Investigators noted that this was the last recorded use of the laptop that morning. Taken together, this data painted a picture that differed substantially from the account Richard had given to police. According to investigators, the laptop activity indicated that Richard was at home and actively using his computer well into the morning, a morning that, according to his own account, he had left the house early and only returned after forgetting something on the road. But there was more, and it came from a source that, at the time Connie Dabate clipped it to the waistband of her pants that morning, no one could have anticipated would become evidence in a murder investigation. On the morning of December 23, 2015, Connie Dabate was wearing a Fitbit 1 fitness tracking device. According to investigative records, the device was clipped to the waistband of her pants. The Fitbit 1 was a consumer fitness product, a small clip-on tracker designed to monitor the wearer's daily physical activity. According to the investigation, the device tracked the steps Connie had taken, flights of stairs climbed, distance traveled, general activity levels, and calories burned throughout the time she wore it. It was the kind of device millions of people wore every day. It was not a surveillance tool. It was not a recording device. It simply tracked movement, the physical, biological reality of a human body in motion. According to the investigation, the data stored by Connie Dabate's Fitbit indicated that her last movements inside the home were recorded at 10:05 in the morning. This was directly and significantly at odds with the timeline Richard Dabate had provided to police. Richard's account placed Connie's death just after 9 o'clock in the morning. The Fitbit data indicated that Connie was still alive and moving inside the home more than an hour after that, at 10:05 a.m. This was not a minor discrepancy. A difference of more than an hour in the recorded timeline of a murder investigation is, by any measure, significant. The case of Connie Dabate became, and continues to be, widely referenced in legal, technological, and journalistic circles for precisely this reason. It was, according to public reporting at the time, among the earliest and most prominent cases in the United States in which data from a consumer fitness tracker was used as direct evidence in a murder prosecution. The case gained national and international attention as a result and was commonly referred to in news publications as the, quote, Fitbit murder. But the Fitbit data and the computer IP address evidence, as powerful as they were, did not exist in a vacuum. And to fully understand the picture that investigators and prosecutors assembled, we need to look at what else the investigation uncovered, because the timeline discrepancy told investigators when Richard's account broke down. What they found in the couple's private communications and personal history began to suggest, according to prosecutors, a possible context for why. During the course of their investigation, Connecticut State Police uncovered what court records describe as evidence of significant problems within the Dabate marriage. Among that evidence, according to the investigation, were notes discovered on Connie's phone. One note, recovered from the phone's notes application and dated to 2014, was titled, according to court records, "Why I Want a Divorce." The reasons listed in that note, according to the investigation, concerned Richard's behavior and character, his immaturity, his irresponsibility with money, what the note described as poor parenting, and what it characterized as his failure to care for her. Investigators also found, according to court records, a separate note on Connie's phone listing reasons to stay with her husband, suggesting, according to the investigation, that Connie had been weighing the future of her marriage in the period leading up to her death. In addition, the investigation uncovered evidence that the couple had been having disagreements over finances and, specifically, over Richard's spending. According to the investigation, the day before the murder, December 22, 2015, the couple had an argument conducted over text message. According to court records, Connie accused Richard in those messages of lying about a cable bill. These were the domestic tensions investigators found preserved in the digital record of the couple's communications. But the investigation also uncovered something that would become one of the most significant contextual elements of the entire case, and something that, according to investigators, directly shaped the circumstances surrounding Connie's death. During the course of their investigation, Connecticut State Police discovered evidence of Richard Dabate's relationship with a woman named Sarah Ganser. According to the investigation, Richard had been having an affair with Ganser. What made this significant, according to the investigation, was not only the existence of the affair, but its status at the time of the murder. Investigators found that Ganser, at the time of Connie Dabate's death on December 23, 2015, was 10 weeks pregnant. And according to the investigation, that child was Richard's. Court records indicate that Richard had found out Ganser was pregnant with his child shortly before the murder. According to the investigation, Richard had told Ganser approximately 1 month before Connie's death that he and Connie were planning to get a divorce. Investigators also found, through their interrogations and interviews, that Richard had initially been less than forthcoming about the nature of his relationship with Ganser when first questioned. In the beginning of the investigation, Richard initially told detectives that he and Connie had experienced fertility issues and that Ganser was going to serve as a surrogate through artificial insemination. Richard also told detectives at this stage that he had done what he described as untraditional things and had gotten Ganser pregnant, but told investigators that Connie was aware of the situation and had planned to, in Richard's words, co-parent the baby. Sometime later, according to the investigation, Richard changed his account. He admitted to detectives that Ganser was not a surrogate, but a friend of his from high school. He also admitted, at this stage, that both he and Connie had cheated on each other in the beginning of their marriage. Richard then told Connecticut State Police that Ganser, who again was 10 weeks pregnant at the time of the murder, was expecting him to divorce Connie. Richard's account to investigators at this stage indicated that he and Connie were, at the same time, purportedly working to salvage their marriage. Sarah Ganser was expecting Richard to divorce Connie. Richard and Connie were purportedly working to save their marriage. These were the circumstances, as uncovered and documented by investigators, surrounding the Dabate marriage in the weeks and days immediately before December 23, 2015. We want to be precise about the language we use here. The investigation uncovered these facts. Prosecutors would later present these facts as context, as relevant background against which the events of that morning should be understood. It was for a jury to weigh and determine what that context meant. What we can say is this: by the time Connecticut State Police had assembled the sum of what they had found, the physical evidence, the canine search results, the IP address data from the computer, the Fitbit timeline, the notes on Connie's phone, the text messages, the affair, the pregnancy, they had constructed a picture that bore very little resemblance to the account Richard Dabate had given them on the morning of December 23, 2015. Based on the totality of the evidence gathered, Connecticut State Police investigators and, later, state prosecutors presented a reconstruction of events from the morning of December 23, 2015 that differed substantially from what Richard Dabate had told them. We want to be clear about something as we walk through this section. What follows represents the version of events presented by Connecticut State Police and state prosecutors, the version supported, in their view, by the evidence they gathered. It is not Richard Dabate's account. It is the account that was ultimately tested in a court of law in front of a jury of Richard's peers. According to the evidence as presented by investigators and prosecutors, Richard Dabate did not leave the house in the early morning hours and drive to work before turning around. The computer data, specifically the login to his Outlook email account at 8:41 a.m. from the Dabate home's IP address, and his later browsing activity at 9:18 a.m., indicated to investigators that Richard was at home and using his laptop well into the morning. According to the investigation's reconstruction, Richard did not email his boss from the side of the road as he had claimed. The IP address data indicated to investigators that this email was sent from within the family home, not from a parked car on a public road. Meanwhile, according to the Fitbit data recovered from the device Connie was wearing, her last recorded movements inside the home occurred at 10:05 in the morning, more than an hour after the time Richard had told police she had died. The combination of these two data sets, the computer activity showing Richard still at home well into the morning, and the Fitbit data showing Connie still alive and moving at 10:05 a.m., provided investigators and prosecutors with what they presented as a timeline fundamentally at odds with Richard's account. The course of events, as presented by Connecticut State Police and prosecutors, placed Richard Dabate at the center of what happened that morning, not as a victim of a home invasion, but as the person responsible for Connie's death. The supposed intruder, the large man in the camouflage suit with the Vin Diesel voice, was, according to investigators, a fiction. The scent dogs had found no trail. The data told a different story. And the physical evidence at the scene, combined with the digital record, pointed, according to prosecutors, to Richard as the person responsible. Richard Dabate was arrested and charged in connection with the death of his wife, Connie Dabate, on December 23, 2015. The charges brought against Richard Dabate were murder, tampering with evidence, and making false statements to police. Each charge, in its own way, reflected a component of what investigators and prosecutors said they had found: the death itself, the alleged manipulation of the crime scene, and the detailed false account Richard had provided to Connecticut State Police in the immediate aftermath of the incident. The case that prosecutors built against Richard Dabate drew on the full range of evidence that Connecticut State Police had gathered. It was a case that, from the time of Richard's arrest, drew significant public and media attention, not only because of the nature of the crime, but because of the way in which it demonstrated, in a high-profile legal context, the potential evidentiary power of consumer wearable technology. Legal scholars, technologists, privacy advocates, and journalists found in the Dabate case a significant landmark, one of the first prominent examples in American legal history of data from a personal fitness tracker being used as direct evidence in a homicide prosecution. But the legal process had only just begun, and between the filing of charges and the resolution of the case in court, several years would pass. Criminal cases of this complexity, involving extensive digital evidence, multiple lines of forensic inquiry, and charges that include both murder and related counts, frequently move through the legal system over a period of years. The case of Richard Dabate was no exception. From the time of the incident in December 2015 to the resolution of the case at trial, more than 6 years elapsed. During that time, the evidence assembled by Connecticut State Police, the computer data, the Fitbit records, the physical evidence, the digital communications, became the foundation of the state's case against Richard Dabate. The passage of time between an incident and a trial is a feature, not a flaw, of the legal process. It reflects the extensive work required to prepare a case for presentation to a jury, the gathering and authentication of evidence, the preparation of witnesses and expert testimony, the procedural and legal motions that are a standard part of any serious criminal prosecution. For the family and friends of Connie Dabate, those years represented something different, a period of waiting for a process to reach its conclusion. The case eventually made its way to trial in 2022, more than 6 years after the morning Connecticut State Police first arrived at the Dabate household in response to that panic alarm. The trial of Richard Dabate took place in 2022. Prosecutors presented their case, built on the evidence that Connecticut State Police had assembled over years of investigation, to a jury in Connecticut. At trial, prosecutors presented the digital evidence, the computer login data, the IP address records, the Fitbit data, alongside the physical evidence from the scene and the evidence related to the relationship and financial context of the Dabate marriage. The Fitbit data, which placed Connie Dabate's last recorded movements at 10:05 in the morning, in direct contradiction to the timeline Richard had provided, was among the most prominently discussed pieces of evidence in the case, both in the courtroom and in the media coverage surrounding the trial. Prosecutors argued that the combination of evidence, digital, physical, and circumstantial, demonstrated that the account Richard Dabate had given police was false, and that the evidence pointed to Richard as responsible for Connie's death. The jury deliberated and reached a verdict. On May 10, 2022, the jury found Richard Dabate guilty. Richard Dabate was found guilty on all 3 counts: murder, tampering with evidence, and making false statements to police. The verdict, when it came, was the culmination of more than 6 years of investigation, legal proceedings, and, at the center of it all, evidence. Evidence gathered from a home security system, from a network router's IP address log, from a laptop's browsing history, and from the step count data of a small fitness tracker worn by a woman who, on the morning of December 23, 2015, had no way of knowing it would one day speak for her in a court of law. Following the guilty verdict on May 10, 2022, the case proceeded to sentencing. On August 18, 2022, Richard Dabate was sentenced in connection with the murder of his wife, Connie Dabate. The sentence handed down by the court was 65 years in prison. 65 years. A number that carries its own weight in the context of a life, in the context of a family, of 2 young sons who lost their mother on the morning of December 23, 2015, and who now face the legal conclusion of the events of that day. The sentencing on August 18, 2022, marked the formal legal conclusion of the case against Richard Dabate. It did not mark the end of the story, because stories like this one, involving a family, a marriage, children, and a life taken, do not have clean endings in the way that legal proceedings do. But the legal system had, over the course of more than 6 years, reached its conclusion. The evidence had been gathered, tested, challenged, and ultimately accepted by a jury. A verdict had been reached. A sentence had been imposed. The case of Connie Dabate gained national and international attention, and a particular place in legal and technological history for reasons that extended beyond the facts of the case itself. At the time of the investigation, the use of data from consumer wearable fitness devices as direct evidence in a murder prosecution was not a standard feature of criminal law. Fitness trackers were products sold in electronics stores. They were marketed to people who wanted to count their steps, set fitness goals, and monitor their health. Their potential use as forensic evidence, as a record of a person's final movements, time-stamped and stored, was not a primary consideration for the people who bought them, or, in most cases, for the investigators who encountered them. The Dabate case demonstrated, like in a high-profile and legally consequential way, that the data generated by these devices could be retrieved, authenticated, and presented in court, and that it could carry significant evidentiary weight. Throughout this documentary, we've examined the facts of this case as they were documented by investigators, presented by prosecutors, and established by a jury's verdict. We have walked through the evidence, the timeline, the data, the legal proceedings. But at the center of all of it, behind the evidence files and the court records and the Fitbit data, were real people, a real family,